Well, good afternoon, everyone. I must say my story is a little bit more boring than the one before because we have much less experience of this whole thing than in Norway. We actually only in Finland have in parish elections to church have the possibility of lowering the voting age. But anyway, I will go through the process. We have had several working groups dealing with these issues and what the thoughts behind this whole issues has been. But to start with, I could say the same as a civil servant. I've myself been sitting in all of these working groups, and I would say that it's not an issue about legislation, it's not an issue about any sort of technical difficulties. It's an issue about politics. If the politicians would like to lower the voting age, there would be no problem of doing so. So it's in fact totally a political issue, like in Norway. But as a background, we had a working group in 2010 where we investigated this issue very thoroughly, and the idea behind this working group was that we've seen a decline in electoral participation among young people, especially during the two last decades, and we see that in some elections only 20 to 30% of the younger people vote. Especially young men are those who quite often remain outside and do not vote. And according to some researchers, it could help by reducing lowering the voting age, as young people at that point of time are in schools. They can perhaps get better support from schools and from families. And secondly, when they vote for the first time, they still usually live in their own home municipality where they have grown up. When they are 18 or older, they move out to study somewhere else, and perhaps the surrounding is less familiar, and that's also an obstacle for voting. Well, the working group did quite, I would say, thorough report about the thing, but there was no political consensus reached on the issue, which means that the parties all parties were not in favor of it. And one peculiarity which differs from different countries is that in some countries, if I remember correctly, the voting age is not in municipal elections written in the constitution in Norway. Am I correct? I think so. But in Finland, at least, we have the voting age. It's a constitutional matter because the constitution says that in parliamentary elections, European elections, and in municipal election, the voting age is 18, and that's it. So you need to change the constitution, which means that we need to have a great support in parliament in favor of it. And so far, we haven't had that. In 2010, the Lutheran Church lowered the voting age to 16 in parish elections, and after the results of that, the voting turnout in these elections was very low, but just like 15% of the voters, but it was at the same level if we look at the young voters and the older ones, because people are not very active in these elections. As a result of this, a new committee was appointed with the party secretaries to investigate this voting age question again. But again, we could only reach one conclusion, and that was lowering the age of initial municipal referendums, and we lowered it to 15 because 15 years, then that's the age when you get many other rights. We thought that 16 was not. Why 16? I mean, that's a good question. Why 16? Why not 15? It can be anything. And we looked at at the legislation, also we have very many different age limits in our legislation for what you can do to a certain age. For example, well, not anymore. A few years ago, when I was under 40, I would have been able to receive funding as a young farmer from the European Union. Now, unfortunately, I'm not young on any of these ladders anymore. But so you see, the age difference varies a lot in the legislation between different things. Then we have the autonomous islands of Åland, and they wanted to change it, lower the voting age in municipal elections on Åland. That's a recent case, but and their own parliament did a proposition for this, but it was not approved in Finland because it was found unconstitutional, because Åland cannot decide on the Finnish constitution, and if it's a constitutional matter, it's the Finnish parliament who makes the decision, so it was abolished. So here, basically, the laws that we would need to change is the constitution, the election law, and the municipal law, and this would be technically a fairly simple issue, so no problem there. Then we can see that is voting age should it always be the same? Well, in Finland, when we first got voting rights, the voting age was 24, and since then the voting age has been lowered several times. So I mean, if you look at this, it's hard to say judge that at some point of time politicians thought that 24 years is suitable. Today, it's perhaps something else. And then we also have voting in citizen. If you sign a citizen initiative, which is sort of a strong tool for initiating things to our parliament, that's also 18 years, the age limit. But young people virtually have access to most other participation rules, and I think that the government what it has said is that before lowering the voting age, we need to enhance civic education. That's why we changed the curricula in order to make young people more knowledgeable about democracy and voting. Then we have a school council became by law mandatory in 2014, so that young people can decide on their issues or have a co-decision rights at schools. Then youth councils became mandatory in 2017 in municipalities, and if we now get the regional reform, they will become mandatory in regions as well, where the idea is that young people through these councils can affect the policies which are done in municipalities and in regions. And then also initiatives, municipal, local and regional initiatives are open for young people. There is no age limits. Then the Youth Act says that young people should be heard and consulted in decisions concerning them, and that can be, for example, through hearings and consultation. And then we have of course, participatory budgeting is one thing that can be done through the municipal law. And for example, the city of Helsinki has used a certain amount of their budget for participatory budgeting, where young people themselves vote for how much of the budget concerning youth should be to what purpose it should be used every year. So there are good examples also. Then if I go to these are not my ideas, this is just the ideas which were put forward in these election commissions that vote in favor of lowering the voting age and against it. And one is, of course, that it could enhance participation among young people, we think that young people are interested and want to participate. the voting age has seen, it has been altered many times during the last century, so it's not a fixed limit. People who are not heard will also, this is quite central, will stop expressing their opinions if they feel that there is not a possibility to express yourself. Voting rights could connect young people closer to their local community, local surrounding, and it could give better, it could give more visibility to youth policy in the election campaign, and then it may increase the possibilities for younger people of being elected, because in Finland as well, quite often people are in the municipal assemblies are quite grey. Let's say they are not the youngest one, even though we have also young people there. The comments not in favor of lowering the voting age has been that young people may be easy to manipulate, an issue which has been discussed here today. Also, what was brought up in the Norwegian presentation, young people more often tend to favor extreme views. We saw in the Norwegian example that this didn't happen. Some say young people are not mature enough and let children be children, not small adults, that we shouldn't encourage children to do things what adults do. Then we have people who are not 18, have not reached majority. They are not competent of them standing as candidates, and do their own decisions. And then we traditionally have not separated between voting rights and rights for candidacy, but that's also a technical problem. I mean, there is nothing in the legislation that says that this necessarily has to be combined. Then what we expected the outcomes of this in our report was, in short term, probably electoral participation would go down a little bit, and hopefully have the opposite effect on a long term. And we need to think about it in the long term perspective. It would probably increase the number of young candidates as parties would react to this. It would bring about a bunch of new voters, and what it would require an amendment of the constitution, the election law, and the municipal law, and it would also require even more emphasis on civic education. So this is all in all what we have been doing in Finland. I think that the question is something that is all the time, or not maybe all the time, but every now and then comes up. It was last year our Prime Minister Sipilä said that we should perhaps lower the voting age to 16, but as it is a constitutional matter, it seems very difficult of finding sort of a consensus between most of the parties. Some parties favor it, some do not, and I think this is the big question. So that's when will it happen? But the future will tell us. Thank you.